We just want free and decolonised education. That was the plea from one student leader while he was being arrested in Braamfontein on Wednesday. The good news, of course, is the NPA has declined to prosecute any of those arrested yesterday in the student protest at Wits. But the promise of free higher education to poor and working class students was made in 2017 by President Jacob Zuma, and of course it had been part of ANC policy for some years before that. So how do we get there? Is it possible? Let's discuss this now with Dr. Linda Meyer, Director of Operations and Sector Support for Universities South Africa. Good evening, Dr. Meyer. So can it be done, really?
Sally, I think that before we ask whether it can be done, we must just understand the problem systemically. So we see that 60% of students are catered for under the NSFAS system, 20% fall within the missing middle category, and 20% you're in the missing middle, that 20% that we spoke about. And this is where our real systemic challenges arise, because these households find it very difficult to fund student fees.
Absolutely, and these are the ones that are left behind, the deserving students in that category, but they don't qualify for a NSFAS fund support. So what do we do about them? Because we've seen, for example, at Wits University, and I've just spoken to Professor Zeblon Vilakazi, and he said they've managed through setting up various funds to actually help up to, like at least 96–97% of students, because he was telling me that they only have between 400 and 700 students now who are still left out in the cold, and they're working hard to try and find a place for them and try and get them the financial support they need. But not every university is as well-resourced as Wits University. Many have very few resources. I'm wondering how we create one solution, because that's what everyone is saying. We need a holistic solution from all the universities. Is that actually possible, though, bearing in mind how differently resourced they are?
Sally, if we look at those 20% of students that we spoke about in the missing middle category, we need to find either funding for them, or we need to start exploring real alternatives. So low-interest loans, for example, what internationally is referred to as contingency loans, where students get loans at 2 or 3%, and once they start working, they're able to pay back. So all of these scenarios, or low-interest loans from banks, are things that we need to explore. But we need to get to a process where we have policy certainty and financial security. Otherwise, you and I will be having this conversation again next year. The 20% of the students are the legacy students. They haven't been catered for, and we need higher education. We can't grow the economy without skills being produced into the economy. And I think we must be pragmatic in this analysis. And when people say a system is not sustainable, the most unsustainable system is where we are not producing skills to grow the economy. And there are many discussions about whether the right qualifications are being produced out of the universities, that we need to refocus, re-engage with the labour economy. All of those are very real and contextual discussions that we shouldn't ignore. But at the core of this problem is, for example, today where the minister said that they are making this NSFAS student, this 5.6 billion rand that is in shortfall available. All the department has done is rearrange their budget, and they're going to readjust it when the MTEF cycle occurs. This means that there is now a shortfall in the budget where something else will need to be cut on. So whether it's infrastructure, it's some other line item in the budget that will now be cut on, and universities inevitably will suffer through this cut. So this is not a sustainable model.
What is a sustainable model? I mean, you mentioned that for that 20%, the missing middle, which is the real problem area, they need to be able to be given the right sort of loans that they can pay back. Is that a policy change that we still need to see, or is that a different spirit of willingness coming from lending institutions, for example?
So I think that the Her Commission did give us all of those suggestions, and that was obviously a commission run by government. And it is really about policy application. It is not that the department hasn't engaged in these discussions before. I mean, in an ideal world, we would have all of this money that we could pay for everybody to attend higher education system, but that is not our financial security and stability at the moment. So what do we need to do to make sure this problem is not an ongoing one is to find solutions to assist this 20% of students that are, through their historic debt. How do we manage that, firstly? And secondly, how do we give them security so that in the duration, in the time that they study, they're not perpetually stressed about re-enrolling the next year, having to find enrollment fees, and that the system then becomes secure and stable.
How hopeful are you that things are moving in the right direction?
Well, I think NSFAS was a huge step in the right direction, because it has given the very poor households and predominantly the beneficiaries of the NSFAS grants. And Sally, I don't know if you know, but they're funding almost 575,000 students. But what has become an additional problem is students that did not previously qualify for NSFAS in second, third, and fourth year this year. What has happened is that their parents have lost their jobs and they now qualify. So this has meant that there is a lower number of first-year intakes because these students now need to be catered for in the system. And universities, for many of them, historic debt is a real problem, because we must remember that universities need to remain as going concerns on any level. So it is not a problem that is going to go away overnight, but we need to start working on the things that really matter, the things that we see play out every year, and find solutions for those so that we can move on with certainty and start concentrating on the things that matter. We see that, for example, the NRF, where funding comes for our postgraduate students, because postgraduate students are not funded through the NSFAS system, that their budget has also been cut. And this does not bode well for the entire university sector, because without research really that underpins what it is that we need to be doing in terms of innovation, in terms of higher education security, it really becomes a huge problem for us to reflect on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for explaining it also very clearly. Dr. Linda Meyer, Director of Operations and Sector Support for Universities SA.